Hi, y'all. Welcome everyone to Capital Factory's first ever Accessibility and Tech Summit presented by Microsoft. My name is Christina Rogers, and you can call me Chris. And I'm going to describe myself. I'm a queer, gender nonconforming woman of color. I'm wearing trans flag eyeshadow as a shout out to my people, and I have an invisible disability called Ehlers. I'm newly the COO of Euphoria.LGBT, a suite of apps putting gender affirmation in the palm of the hands of trans individuals everywhere. Find us in the App Store. Besides that, I'm a 6-time founder, mostly in retail, with a 17x exit of my fourth company. I've attended 7 accelerators, including Euphoria's most recent acceptance into the new chip accelerator. I'm thrilled to be here with everyone today, and I would love to welcome my co-MC for the day, the wonderful, brilliant, my friend, Zubi Onwatu.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everyone. My name is Zubi Onwuta, and about myself, I am a black male. I'm wearing a pair of glasses, and I'm wearing a striped shirt. And what color is this again?
It's a beautiful light gray with a white stripe. You look gorgeous.
Thank you very much. And about myself, I'm the founder and CEO of Think and Zoom. Think and Zoom is a startup that's creating a world where visual impairment no longer steals dreams or kills careers. It's providing solutions to people who are disabled by giving them hands-free, brain-controlled solutions to enable them do more and be more productive in life. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Future of Disability. This is a media arm that shares stories of disabled user innovators. For instance, the co-inventor of the HTTP protocol that's enabling us to communicate today is Vint Cerf. And Vint is hard of hearing, and he invented this protocol because he wanted a better way to communicate with his family. So shout out to Vint Cerf, and thanks so much for your work, Vint.
We have a brilliant keynote and 2 awesome panels for you today around accessibility and design and HR and hiring, followed by a startup showcase. But before we kick a few things off, we want to give you some things to know. I know we've all been Zooming for over a year now, but a few things to know is up at the top of the platform of Zoom, if you hover your mouse, over the bottom, if you hover your mouse on the Zoom screen, you'll see the closed captioning option. You should be able to turn on closed captioning with the bottom middle button and then choose the option that best fits your needs, closed captioning or full transcript. We'll be recording and sharing this webinar with all of our attendees in a follow-up email, so if you miss anything, you'll be able to rewatch. Anything that's shown or gets shared today will be on the landing page, and you can access that anytime during the event or after. We'll drop the link in the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and share your LinkedIn or contact information. We'll have chat moderators throughout the whole event. If you run into any issues or need assistance, please reach out to any Capital Factory staff in the chat. Also, this is Capital Factory's first ever Accessibility and Tech Summit. It's important today that we stay open and vulnerable to learning and growing together as a community, as this is quite unlike any other summit Capital Factory has produced. Why? Because disability affects all demographics, and we want to respect that and encourage you to ask questions and participate in the chat. And thank you so much for being here with us. Zubi, I know we'll get a little bit of a chance to talk about Think and Zoom later in the program, but can you tell us how you got involved in the entrepreneurship community?
It was quite by accident. I fell into it. In summary, all I wanted to do was be a medical doctor. I started pre-med. I was in the US military 63 Bravo. And within 2 years, I became legally blind. It meant I could see the eye chart from 20 feet away, and within 2 years, down to 1 foot away. And so wow. The military said goodbye, and along with my medical studies, and I was forced to choose something else. I was affected by Stargardt's, a form of macular degeneration. So I was forced into something else, and I chose computer engineering. I studied that. I worked as a software engineer for many years, but along came another eye disorder, corneal dystrophy, and that ended that career. And so I didn't know what else to do, so I did what most engineers do, build something. So I decided to build a solution that addresses my problem. I invented and patented a brain controller for magnifiers, and that's where the name Think and Zoom comes from. And then somebody asked me, well, how are you going to get into the hands of other people who need it? And I said, what? And that was how my entrepreneurial journey started. So that's how it started.
How do we share with other people? That's amazing. How old were you, like when you realized you had to start doing something new, when you started engineering your product?
Oh, that was just about 5 years ago.
Really?
So it's really very recent.
It's unbelievable technology. I honestly would have thought a lot longer.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Zuby. If you want to learn more about Think and Zoom or connect with Zuby, the best way to do so is on LinkedIn at Zuby Unwuta or zubyunwuta.com. Check out this journey, Think and Zoom. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and search my name, Christina Rogers, or find our euphoria.lgbt apps in the App Store and Google Play. Now, let me throw it to you, my friend.
Thanks so much, everybody. Now we're going to hear from the founder and CEO of Capital Factory, Joshua Bear, to say a few words. Over to Joshua.
Capital Factory is committed to increasing diversity in the entrepreneurial community and making our community a welcoming and inclusive environment. We know that diverse and inclusive teams perform better. The data shows that they're more successful and produce bigger returns. But that's not the way most teams are today. We're starting from a major disadvantage due to hundreds of years of systemic discrimination based on race, gender, physical disabilities, and of course, sexual orientation. Sometimes it's blatant and intentional, but just as often, it's subtle and unconscious. Diverse and equitable teams won't happen unless we are intentional about it. If we don't actively focus on it, we end up with teams that all look the same. That's why we're all doing this. Leaders, entrepreneurs, and allies in tech who support and invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our DEI strategy at Capital Factory has 6 focus areas: women, people of color, Latinos, LGBTQ+, veterans, and accessibility. First, we partner with every other organization we can find who's already doing great work with DEI. Groups like Div Inc., Houston Tillotson University, Opportunity Hub, and Women at Austin. We invite them to use our space, we cross-promote each other's events, and we refer entrepreneurs to each other. We trust them to give entrepreneurs 3-month golden tickets to join our community, get mentorship, and help prepare them to join Capital Factory and raise funding. Second, we host summits designed to celebrate diverse entrepreneurs and talk out in the open about the challenges that they face. This is a great way for us to meet new people who we wouldn't normally and get the message out that our community is open to all. It's also a great way to elevate the profiles of our most successful diverse entrepreneurs so they can serve as role models and inspiration to others. Third, we put up $100,000 investment challenges reserved for teams with diverse founders. This has been an extremely effective way for us to meet new entrepreneurs with amazing companies who we just wouldn't have found before. There's something about putting a $100,000 prize up in the air that pulls people out of the woodwork. Only one company wins the competition, but we always end up meeting other new companies to invest in as well. If you know underrepresented entrepreneurs who should be part of Capital Factory as an entrepreneur, mentor, or investor, please introduce them to us. My email is josh@quityourjob.com, and I'll help make sure that they get pointed in the right direction.
Thanks, Josh and Capital Factory. Now we're gonna head over to our keynote. Zuby, do you want to introduce?
Sure. Let's jump into our keynote. I'd like to introduce Carol Glazier. Carol is the president of the National Organization on Disability. This is America's oldest civil rights organization for 61 million disabled Americans. Over the past 15 years as president, Carol has transformed this organization to be the country's premier resource for disability inclusion. Carol has spoken as a subject matter expert on issues on employment for people with disabilities across many stages. It is my pleasure to introduce Carol. Take it away, Carol.
Here we go.
We've
Here
got-
I am.
You can see.
Hello, everybody. So I love your story. It's a wonderful story. And I would recommend that you let people hear a screen reader if they haven't ever done that, because the human brain can understand 26 syllables per second. which means that a screen reader can read a document at about 100 times the pace of any of the rest of us. So, which leads to the main point of what I want to talk about today, which is that we have to stop seeing disability as a weakness needing charity, and rather see it as a talent in need of opportunity. I'm a white woman who will never call myself old because I'm a boomer. I never called myself middle-aged either at that point. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Started my career in the 1970s when I owned a restaurant, and I've done a succession of other businesses since. And it's great to be here with you. I'm also a serial fighter for social justice, having started out in the civil rights movement of the 1960s, but also made my way through the women's movement, and now through the disability rights movement, because I have a son who's 29 years old, who was born with hydrocephalus, series of medical complications, physical and intellectual disabilities. I've been his advocate for his whole life, and now I'm the advocate for many more people, like my son Jacob. So I really should title this Fears, Myths, and Stereotypes, because a lot of what I want to do here today is to try to debunk some of those myths that are commonly held, even in the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation that this country is in the middle of right now in a fairly significant way. I'm going to tell you a little bit about NOD and then a little bit about disability rights and the history, because what we often find is people kind of don't know where we've been as a movement and how we've trailed beyond other civil rights movements, but we're catching up, and that's a very promising story from our perspective. So if you move to the next slide, our organization has been around for almost 40 years. We fought every aspect of the disability rights movement, including the ADA, which came 8 years after we were created. The pictures that you see are meant to show how important we think we are. They're really not, but we've been told that we should. And there's a great story behind my meeting with Barack Obama. This was taken in 2013. I had actually offered him a job in 1985, and he turned me down flat. And when I got to meet him, however many years later, almost 30 years later, in that photo, you can see I was telling him that I think he made the right decision. So we have a presence in Washington. We have a presence in corporate board rooms. We're about changing awareness and seeing disability in a different light. But mostly currently, we work with employers to help them build a more disability inclusive workforce. So if you go on to the next slide, the main thing that we do with employers and where our relationships start is with a tool called the Disability Employment Tracker. It's a confidential assessment. It's a benchmarking tool. We have 230 companies almost in the pool. It's 9 years old. Those companies employ a total of 10 million people. And it's a way to understand where you are today and then where you are over time if you stick with it in these 5, what we consider to be the most important areas of workforce inclusion when it comes to disability. Go to the next slide and you see that we often will work with employers using what we call our disability employment maturity curve. And I would ask all of you on the call today to think about where you might be between seeing disability in a mode of just exploring it. Are you looking to comply? Federal regulations require that if you're a government contractor, you have to have a 7% workforce goal. The 230 companies in our pool, only 4% of their employees have been willing to disclose a disability. I can virtually assure you that that number is off by a factor of probably 300 or 400. When you think about the numbers of disability in our population. So what you have is a major trust problem with people who do not want to disclose their identity, their disability to their employers. And what we try to do with employers is help them to start by getting their employees to come out, to disclose their disability, to get the accommodations they need, and then to be much more productive. If you go to the next slide, series of services that we work with employers on, I'm sorry, where are we? Are we together here? Yeah, these are several of the ways that we work with employers, starting with the tracker and then moving to individual services to employers. We also have a policy presence in Washington. And we find that a lot of our employer partners really value that kind of relationship. They value the opportunity to talk to elected officials, people in the administration, and frankly, people in Washington really enjoy talking to you all as employers. So how is disability defined? If you go to the next slide, you see that, and this gets us up to the ADA Amendments Act, which broadened the definition of disability. There are 3 definitions of disability. One is that someone has a current condition that limits activities. It could be sensory, it could be physical, it could be mobility. You have that condition. Second definition, you had a condition. So people who are cancer survivors, people who have had a heart attack, people who have had epilepsy or seizures at once upon a time, but don't any longer, are seen in the eyes of the ADA as a person with a disability. And the most interesting definition is what is sometimes called the regarded as definition. Some people are just simply treated or thought of as if they have a disability. They may not, but they are regarded as having a disability. And according to the ADA, they could be discriminated against on that basis without actually having to prove that there is a disability present. Go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about history here because, as I mentioned before, we are trailing, we think, we are trailing behind other civil rights movements, the Black civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, and LGBTQ rights. And we are trying to catch up, but if you look at the history, you get a pretty good sense of where we've been. We have moved from prisons and poorhouses of the 1700s through the 1800s, where, and I want to talk about forced sterilization for a moment. 1927, what happened was, at once upon a time, the dominant policy in this country towards people with disabilities, and it goes right up into the 1980s, and I really want you to sit on that for a moment because it's a scary reality. It was eugenics. The idea was that disabilities were deficiencies that could be bred out, that we can actually breed out undesirable qualities or qualities thought of as undesirable, which includes people who are blind, who are deaf, who have intellectual disabilities, who have sensory disabilities, who have mental illness. And we know that that policy of breeding out or eugenics lasted until the 1980s, when the last state actually abolished forced sterilization of people with disabilities. Meaning, in 1927, the Supreme Court upheld the mandate that states had to sterilize people with disabilities because they were deemed mentally unfit. Here's a quote I want to read to you all. This is a quote that came from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a Supreme Court justice at the time, who was upholding forced sterilization. It is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory sterilization is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. So ponder that for a moment, a policy that lasted until the 1980s. And then as recently as COVID, when doctors were forced into making decisions early in the pandemic, when we felt there wasn't going to be enough care and we had to engage in medical rationing, doctors are actually allowed to make decisions about who lives and who gets treatment based not only on age or perception of how long a person's going to live, but also based on their perception of a person's quality of life. And early in the pandemic, people with disabilities who had to go into the hospital with COVID not only could be denied treatment, but those who depended on ventilators to just live could have them confiscated. Fortunately, the Equal Opportunity Commission, Department of Justice, intervened and ruled that to be discriminatory. But you can see that even persisting until the present, we have this notion of disability as being something to be feared, to be risen above, to be cured, some extreme condition that is so severe that we have to identify it with euphemisms like special or exceptional. And so just to put this in a historical perspective, I'm not going to go through all of these milestones, but the ADA is the most far-reaching civil rights legislation for people with disabilities in history. It was passed 30 years ago. And it was based on the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I like to think of it as we had some unfinished business of the civil rights movement. And fortunately, we were able through the ADA to eradicate that kind of discrimination. 1992, the Olmstead decision, very significant, which required people with disabilities to not be institutionalized, because up until that time, again, the dominant policy beyond eugenics was that we would keep people in institutions to prevent them from causing harm to themselves and others. And these, again, are some of the stereotypes that even to this day that we live with in our work. Next slide, facts and figures. Just to give you a sense, disability and people with disabilities, 61 million, 1 out of every 4 people in this country. It's the largest minority group. It touches every other diversity segment. And it's a group that anybody, we like to say, anybody can join at any time. I think Zuby told that story very, very eloquently. 83% of disabilities are actually acquired. Most people think of disability as something that you're born with. The truth is only 17% of that 61 million is born with a disability. The rest of us, and I'm in that group, with post-traumatic stress disorder, with mental illness, which is perhaps the most stigmatized disability of all, acquired later in life. Go to the next slide and you can see some more facts and figures, but earnings are considerably less, poverty is considerably greater, and many more people with disabilities were laid off during COVID than people without disabilities. Next slide. Big consumer market, something for all of you as entrepreneurs to be concerned about. It's a gigantic consumer market, particularly when you think about people with disabilities and those who are family members or friends or those in their sphere of influence. And we've got plenty of data that show that people will actually switch brands when they know that a company is disability friendly, is disability inclusive. Important in tech, particularly because we've all recognized the benefits for companies to have a workforce that reflects your consumer base. If you're making products that are meant to be accessible, isn't it important to have the very people who are meant to be consumers of that product be the ones who are actually working on the products for your businesses? Next slide. I'm not going to go through all this data with you. Suffice it to say that people with disabilities were the most and had been the most disproportionately affected by COVID. And if you go to the next slide, the concept of occupational segregation, that was a new term, I will say, for me, having worked as a civil rights activist my entire career. But occupational segregation mainly means that there are classes of people who are in entry-level jobs, low skill, low education, low pay, who in the age of COVID have been the people who are serving the meals, who are cleaning the buildings, who are the nurse's assistant. Those are the people disproportionately affected by the economics of COVID. And we know that the COVID recession is the most unequal in modern history in this country. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit, I'm sorry, keep going. One more. I want to talk about diversity in the tech sector. And forgive me if I'm telling you things that you know already, but I got to say, when I looked at these numbers, it was mind-blowing for me, really. Because frankly, I think of the tech sector, your sector, as one that is pretty much led by people who are very forward-thinking, open-minded, and very tolerant, and very inclusive. But when you look at the numbers, you can see that this is a sector that has a lot of work to do when it comes to diversity generally, and in particular when it comes to disability. And if you look at some of these numbers, what you can see, I'm sorry, go back to the slide before that. I realize I'm addressing a different slide than the one you're seeing. So here's where you look at some of the data on tech and accessibility. The Diversity Inc. Top 50 is by some accounts, the sort of premier list of companies that are the most diverse. It's based on heavy data analysis of all kinds of data. Think about the Corporate Equality Index, but for all of disability, and it's the Diversity Inc. Top 50 companies. 0 of the top 50 companies are in the tech sector. Only 26% of tech positions held by women. And then you get even smaller and smaller numbers when you get to racial and ethnic minorities. And we did a study of the 38 top tech companies in the country, and only 5 of them even had data on disability. And so it's a sector that clearly is one that needs to start looking at itself, in our view, and needs to start tracking and needs to start becoming much more transparent, because these are the qualities that are going to help industry thrive in the future. Your customers value transparency, and they value diversity and inclusion and belonging. And if your numbers aren't even collected, it's very hard to report that to your consumer market. If you look at the next slide, please. From our experience in Zuby, you may have found this in your own journey to find accessible products for yourself and then to make them. But most tech today, whether you're talking about conference capabilities or other business processes, PowerPoint presentations, other ways that we're communicating with each other in the business world, most of the tech applications out there are accessible-ish and have a ways to go. But we also know that with an increased focus on telework, we know that customer demand is going to continue to accelerate. I'm talking to a group of people that knows all of these things. So I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on it, but clearly there's some work to do. There's some pivoting to do to see this as a market segment, to see it as talent, to see it as a segment you want to both create products for, but also one that you want to hire people who are in the position of creating those products because we're the ones who know what we need. And we know that improving all of users' experiences through universal design and other ways of seeing your products, not just for a segment of people, but for all of your customers, we know that digital accessibility and the universal design is going to lift all boats, if you will, the tide that lifts all boats. And reflecting the end users in your workforce is going to create better products and create closer connections for you to the people you love and to the brands that you value. If you look at the next slide, just a few of the processes, the business processes that can help tech firms become more disability inclusive. Think about talent sourcing. Think about the online job portals you're using. Think about your website and accessibility, and not just where you're posting your jobs, but your total website. How are you potentially screening out valuable talent? Are you training your recruiters and hiring managers? Our disability employment tracker shows us that the companies that are training recruiters and managers in just the basics of disability etiquette and accessible processes like interviews, that you're going to get much better numbers in terms of the job applicants with disabilities and the people who are going to succeed in your workforce. We also know on the talent sourcing side that partnerships with disability organizations is going to be the best way for you to source talent. Online job boards are great, but when it comes to actually getting people in the door and having them see you as an employer of choice, it's going to mean work on the ground, and that work on the ground needs to include relationships with disability organizations. Think about climate and culture. Think about whether your leadership teams, yourselves, actually have a disability. And do you want to disclose that disability? Because another success factor that we have seen about climate and culture is that there's nothing that will engender trust more quickly for people to come out with their disability than having senior leaders disclose a disability. And we know that when you think about mental illness, you think about depression and anxiety, which are traits that cut across every segment of your workforce. You know that you've got people in your leadership ranks that have disabilities. And when they come out with those disabilities, it's almost like a sigh of relief that in larger companies, we see that just permeates through the rest of the workforce, and people come out. People practices and policies. Putting your onboarding materials into an accessible format, telling people when you hire them that you are willing to accommodate any disability they may come forward with. That first touch point of onboarding ends up being really important as a way to signal to your people that you are an open and inclusive workforce. You want to know who they are, and you want to be able to accommodate them. Workplace and technology, well, we could go on about that forever, but we also know that VCs and others that are going to be looking at your business closely, more and more are going to ask you for your diversity numbers, and more they're going to be asking whether disability is a component of your diversity numbers. You want to take a step even further and make all of your content, all of your information that's online into an accessible format, and get an accessibility statement and put it online. It's easy to do, and it's something that, again, engenders a signal. You are an employer of choice. You want to be a leader among your peers in disability inclusion. And then finally, strategy and metrics. And we all know about the importance of measuring and the importance of measuring what you do if you consider it important and you want to get results. Communications campaigns, other ways of creating the strategy that's going to signal you as a disability inclusive employee. So I have not used up time, and I'm very much hoping that this can become a dialogue and that people have Q&A. What do we got?
Wow, thank you so much, Carol. Your keynote aptly titled Fears, Myths, and Stereotypes. A lot of the information you shared will be quite new to our audience and even those who are going to rewatch this later on. Just in summary, what few parting words can you give people, sort of like a moving forward from now on, do these, right? What summary words can you leave us with, please?
I would say 2 words. We recently ran an awareness campaign, and the 2 words were look closer. And what we meant by that was, when you think of somebody who is resilient, who can solve problems, who's persistent, tenacious, if you're not thinking of a person with a disability, look closer. That's what I would say, Zippy.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you so much for all the hard work and being a champion. And thanks for being here with us today.
Nothing, no questions, come on, somebody's got a question. Is there a way I can rename myself? I love that. I love it. What do you want to call yourself? Come on, Marianne, we'll support it. I see Ken is asking, is Jen Smith on? Oh, favorite accessible tool. Look, there's nothing that beats JAWS right now, but Zuby, you may have a different viewpoint. I'd have to ask you, but the blind people in our organization, as I say, it sometimes is mind-blowing when you hear their screen readers. They're very efficient, they're pretty accurate, and they're very fast. But I would turn that question over to you as well, Zuby, as a blind person. What do you say?
We'll actually touch on that a little later in the show. So
okay, all right. I don't want to steal your thunder. I will tell you though that the meeting technologies have not been terrific. And the deaf people in our organization, we have problems with Google meetings because a lot of companies consider them not secure. So we are relegated to Microsoft Teams and Zoom. And I will tell you, they both have work to do when it comes to accessibility, particularly for people with hearing impairments. The closed caption functions on both of those have much to be desired.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, Carol. All right, moving on. This upcoming chat is about accessibility in design. We'll aim to address and discuss the discriminatory aspects related to user experience for people with disabilities. Web accessibility ensures people with disabilities can equally perceive, understand, navigate, contribute, and interact with websites and tools. When done correctly, web design should be technically and functionally usable by people with disabilities. Please welcome to the Zoom stage, Jennifer Smith, a senior program manager of accessibility for Microsoft, with a focus on compliance and accessibility in design. Jen Smith has more than 18 years of experience leading and managing traditional, digital, and emerging technology projects, government and nonprofit organizations. She's had a passion for accessibility and has been working on making digital spaces more accessible for the disabled. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. And I am here today with Wendy. So quickly, let me describe myself. I'm Jen Smith, she, her. Like they said, from Microsoft. I'm a white middle-aged woman, long brownish grayish hair, straight. I have glasses with dark frames and rosy cheeks. Today I'm wearing kind of a gray coat thing, sitting in a room with white walls behind me, some light wooden doors in the background. And I did want to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And I'm so thrilled to be here today with Wendy Fox from Log Me In. Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Jen, super happy to be here as well. I hope you can all hear me. Awesome, cool, thanks for that quick nod. Yes, so I'm Wendy Fox. I work at LogMeIn. I'm the lead of our design system and of our bottom-up approach of accessibility champions. And also to quickly introduce myself visually. So I have long curly hair. I guess I should call myself a mid-aged woman, sitting here in a dark blue bottom-up shirt. Background is pretty much all plants, big wardrobe, shelf, sometimes a yellow Labrador walking through the frame. And if you're hearing a slight accent, it's a German one. And I pretty much live with low vision, tinnitus, and chronic pain.
So thank you, Wendy, for introducing yourself. We have a really quick amount of time that we've got to cover a lot of stuff. I do have a deck, but for some reason, technology isn't cooperating. So let's just launch into it. The first question we're going to talk about is, how do you make the case for accessibility?
Yeah, I guess the easy one we'd love all to have is that we just say it's the right thing to do, and then we stop and we go do it, right? So, but sadly, it doesn't stop there. People want to hear numbers, they want to hear statistics. Of course, we can talk about like it being a civil right, it minimizing legal risk, but as we talked about before and also heard from Cal, it's like it's a giant market. It's not just people that live with disabilities, it's also their employees, colleagues, friends. It's just like doubling and tripling. And I think you shared with me that it's like $7 trillion of spending power. So even if people want to hear numbers, we can even throw those at them. And I think what I love is that at Longmean, we don't try to talk about accessibility as like a specific feature or as a specific part. It's making our products inclusive from the start. So either you design inclusively and accessibly, or you actively exclude people. And that's where I usually try and start and change that mindset from adding something, but actually including everyone from the start. And that's where I usually try and get the conversation going.
Yeah, and I think we have found that especially with the pandemic, a lot of people have thought like, oh, we'll add in accessibility later. But if you make it accessible from the start, it really does make your experience more robust and more adaptable to environmental change and global change faster than your agile processes can do it, because you've thought through, what is this thing? What does it do? What am I making for people? Who am I leaving out? And then it can grow and adapt and change with your customers as they change and grow. And then it's a matter of being inclusive instead of like sectioning off people like, oh, this is for blind people, or this is for deaf people, or what have you. You're thinking holistically about anything that could be a permanent disability to temporary or situational. And if you do it at the forefront, it truly makes your experience more adaptable to change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I often hear that, especially from the design perspective, that, oh, I feel limited, like the color space is so small and the text size is so big, and I can't use this 10% gray that I love for my dividers. And I think that's the spot where you can say, yeah, but don't you love a good challenge? Don't you want to understand your user and really solve their problems and not just yours? Like, get the experience, as they said before, right? Use a screen reader, turn off your screen for once and really get into that experience and build a product that works amazingly with just a screen reader or just a keyboard, that really like face that challenge and see where it takes you, and not just solve for your own problems and your own perspective.
Exactly, because you can, I've seen a lot of people that like shear off different pieces of what they think doesn't embody a quote unquote normal user. And then when you look at it in the end, you realize that you sheared off more people than you've actually included in your experience, because it's limited to only working in these really precise conditions with like certain monitor sizes and experiences. And you forget how distracted and how multidimensional people are when they're using your experience in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned before, like the scalability, it's not just like, yeah, we can sell to more people or this works for other people as well, but we are not just solving for someone with a disability, right? So many features or things that we have nowadays, like subtitles. I love having subtitles in a noisy environment. I don't need to be hard of hearing or deaf to enjoy subtitles. And it's the same with zooming in. Like, we're not getting younger, right? So I have like text size everywhere is 100%. I use dark mode everywhere because I can't deal with the glare, especially when I'm in dark lighting. So there's so many things that we solve out of the box when we think inclusive and accessible. And that's the part that, as you see, makes me really excited. And I think that's where it really like also makes fun. It's great. It's not an additional workload. It's really a cool challenge and a great experience when you design for everyone and really be empathetic for all of your users.
Yep. So let's dive into our next question since we're so constrained on time. How do you get started with accessible and inclusive design?
Yeah, I can totally understand that everyone would like to have this manual that is like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then at the end you have 100% and all checkboxes done. But I think the tricky part is that it is specific to a product or your company, or might even be like your culture environment. So it's really important to start with your users, right? And I really love what you guys have done at Microsoft with inclusive design approach that you framed, where you start with a user-centric approach. And then based on that, you build the empathy and the mindset, and then look into what are the right tools for us? What are the right methods for us? How do we build inclusive products in a way that it fits our company, our culture, and our employees?
Exactly. And I think remembering that it's a practice. You're going to start somewhere. You're not going to know everything, but it's something that grows with you as you practice and as you carry this out. You're not going to be perfect. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. You jump in, you work with what you know, you scope what you are able to change, you learn and you grow, you talk to your customers, and then you approach it again in this circular way where you're constantly improving and iterating on the process.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And then of course, testing, right? Like,
yeah,
you don't want to stay in your bubble. Like, make sure you get your products out, you get someone who's deaf to use your online meeting tool. And you might learn that they really want to pin the camera that has the interpreter, or you check in with someone like me who's low vision. And I might not be aware if there's some third-party tools or anything I should be able to set in my browser or on the native system. Like, this really will teach you, like, what do your users need and how do you solve for them? And I think that's the fascinating part of finding your own path for accessibility and then really following through and do the iteration and go back to your roots when you find places where you can improve and adapt.
Yep. 100%. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is when you're designing something, what is this thing and what does it do? What are you empowering people to do with this? Because a lot of times designers will visually create something down to hex values and exact pixel spacing, but forget to talk about, like, what is this control? So we're all adapting these ones and zeros, yes, no, very binary code to adapt to humans and the way that they interact with things. And so it's going to be complex. It's not going to be a really easy, clear path to draw. You're going to have to take in your customer needs and expectations and adapt your design with your knowledge to fit those needs and to be flexible enough to do it.
Absolutely. And I think that also ties in well with what Carol earlier said about hiring diverse and inclusive, right? If you look around at your company and you realize, I don't even have a colleague that's maybe low vision or blind or has any motor impairment. So then this is something you can solve, right? Talk to the experts, hire the experts, and get those perspectives into your team. And then it's way easier than constantly trying to, like, hey, who am I solving for? And all these approaches. So I think that's also something that can really fuel the path to accessibility or even journey.
Definitely. So what are common mistakes that you've seen, Wendy, when people are starting with accessibility?
Yeah, so I think especially from the design perspective, it's often that feeling of I'm being limited, right? They taking all my colors, they taking my tiny text sizes. And I think that's, as I mentioned before, is like that being open to a new challenge, like take those tools and be innovative. Like, don't be stuck on what you studied with or what is your favorite design or something. Be innovative, like be user-centered and don't be scared to explore. And I think the other main one that I'd like to share is really the not trying to like going for 100% out of the box, because it will be frustrating. Like, as we said, find that journey and find the practice and improve and learn and adapt, and don't try to be perfect from the start.
Yes, 100%. And I will say, and we had talked about this earlier, Wendy, is to avoid something that seems too good to be true. Easy fixes, companies promising really quick solutions for a really complex topic. There is a lot of context and understanding and nuance to disabilities, to people's needs and their environments and the assistive technology that they use. And there isn't a quick AI fix that you can just plug into your site to magically fix everything, right?
Yeah, totally. It would be like you replace your users with some AI algorithms and you hope that it's like, yeah, using super flat personas, right? They will never be your actual users. They will never replace talking to your actual users. So a little tool or a little algorithm piece of AI will not fix talking and listening to your users. So I think that's really the piece and the core part of accessible design.
Yep, exactly. And I think one thing before we get into questions is to remember you're not alone in this. There's a lot of communities of practice, even if you're at a startup by yourself. Twitter, LinkedIn, Slack. Other thoughts, Wendy, on that going alone?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as you said, Twitter, Slack are already fantastic communities. Also, the WCAG crowd is super great to interact with, but also look around at your company. Like, you might start out and thinking you're alone, but it's so easy to find all those people that themselves have disability. They might be invisible, obviously, so you might not have known. So there might also be ERGs, so like employee resource groups. Many bigger companies now have those that are focused on mental health, that are focused on disability and inclusion. So have a look around, check in with your colleagues, with leadership, and just see if you don't find someone in the company, there are great communities and resources all over the internet as well.
Exactly. And our slides are up on the event page. So if you want to look at that, we've got takeaways there. We've got a lot of resources on how you can dive in, understanding the WCAG rules, watching some videos. If you learn better by video or reading or listening to things, there's a lot of really helpful resources out there that'll lower the barrier to entry and help you realize you don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do everything perfect. Start somewhere. So we are happy to take questions. I haven't seen any pop up in the chat just yet, but somebody did add that as a designer, you need to put your ego to the side. You're designing for others, not you. And I think that's a common trap that we also fall into. Yeah,
absolutely. And we had similar times when you're really used to a pattern that you follow. I think especially data visualization is one of those where you're really used to like using strong color palettes, right? You go all out and then someone comes around the corner and says like, this might not work for someone that is colorblind. And they're like, that's just, yeah, like prevent yourself from that, take the ego aside and do the research first before you go on that color-based and really visual and graphic design-based journey.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see any other questions from the audience right now. Moderators, or is there anything that I'm missing? Oh, here we go. If a team doesn't have a lot of resources on accessibility and want to improve their product, what would be a place to start? Color contrast, something else? I'll let you go first, Wendy.
Oh, that's a good one. I think it depends on the product, of course, right? If your product's all grayscale, then of course you don't have to worry that much. But it's a good question. Where do you get started? So I think, yeah, if you have content, like start with the content, make sure the content is accessible. It would be like text size, screen reader, and keyboard accessibility. And yeah, I don't want to say check those boxes, but start with those that have a high impact, right? Color contrast can be one of those, but I would say really understand what is the core part of your app, what is the problem you solve, and make sure it works for your main user group.
Yep. Color contrast is important. Keyboard support is really important. Go through your experience. The tab key would take you to interactive elements, and make sure you can use your keyboard to interact with everything that a mouse could interact with. That's a really essential part to assistive technologies and people who use them being able to participate in what you've built and not being blocked out from from anything. And I think understanding the importance of choosing accessible frameworks and component libraries is another good place to kind of anchor on and make sure you're understanding like what you're getting out of the box when you choose to build something with a certain library.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also interesting is like, look at your roadmap, look at the bits and pieces you're going to touch next. Maybe there's something you're going to work on anyway, where you can have an easy win, where you can have a low hanging fruit that you like just check while you're working on that part anyway.
Yes, exactly. And with that, I think we're pretty much at time and ready to hand it back over to Chris and team. Thank you so much for having us. Wendy, thank you for this great conversation. I've made a great friend and another ally in the accessibility world. And this is great. Thank you all for being here.
Absolutely agree. I'm happy to chat for another hour, but I guess they'll force us to go off camera again.
Thanks so much, Jen and Wendy. I mean, what an exciting conversation. From, it's either you are designing inclusively or you are excluding from the beginning. I really liked how you phrased all of that. But before I'll let you go, I'm gonna ask each of you, just give us in summary, right? Because a lot of this information, again, to our audience is all kind of new. So to Jen, to you first, in summary, what will be a few parting words that people can keep in mind as they go forward?
Oh, Jen, you're on mute, my love. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Aging is not as fun as it used to be, or I don't know that it ever was. There's a lot of common mistakes. I know Wendy's got a lot of thoughts on this too. I'll reiterate, don't hold up perfection over progress. Don't go for easy fixes. And you're not alone in this. There's a group of people out there that can help you and grow as you grow. And Wendy?
Oh, yeah, I mean, like just what Jen said, right? +1 on everything. It's really the accept the challenge to change your perspective, showcase how accessible design is good usability, and be daring, be innovative, and yeah, don't feel limited.
Once again, thank you so much, Jen and Wendy, for such a fascinating conversation. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Just Carolina, please, if you are in the audience, please, can you turn on your video camera so we can see you? We'd like to thank one of our sponsors, Accenture, which has been a great partner to Capital Factory with all of their diversity, equity, and inclusion summits. So Carolina, please, if you're in the audience, if you can turn on your video, that would be great.
Yes, can you see me on video?
Yes,
Awesome,
we do.
awesome. We're so glad to have you, and it's a great pleasure to introduce to all Carolina Cardoso at Accenture. She is the market client lead for their diversity and inclusion initiatives. So Carolina, please, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that warm welcome. Hello, hi everyone. My name is Carolina Cardoso. So it's a Hispanic form of Carolina. So happy to join here together. I am really honored and delighted to be part of this conversation. As you mentioned, my journey at Accenture, just to ground ourselves, I've been here 24 years, but much of it, 2 decades, so I'm dating myself, 20 years has been focused on inclusion and diversity. So my fingerprint is in many of our I&D trainings, tools, and initiatives. And part of what I want just to anchor on is that as we've seen it for ourselves in the journey that many of us are on, shaping an inclusive culture can sometimes feel like heavy lifting. It requires courage for self-reflection, boldness to lead. But we just heard the ability to be agile, right? Knowing that we don't have to have everything built out, that we can give ourselves permission to shift and change. Understanding that there's a wide array of network that we can tap into for thought leadership and expertise in this space. For us, it's creating and sustaining an inclusive culture that really anchors on ensuring that not only our employees, but also the people that we serve understand our commitment, our advocacy, and the awareness of us ensuring that we are pivoting to understanding the needs of the employee experience, right? And that employee experience, understanding that there is this hyper focus on the person's disability and the need for enablement. Part of this, as we've talked about ourselves internally and the way that we've showcased it externally is understanding that it does require bold leadership. It requires comprehensive action so that we were looking at policies and practices and empowering environments. I think those are fundamental needs that as we pivot and have these conversations on what is possible, it's knowing that some of this requires for us to see it, and you heard it earlier, to look at it differently, to think outside of the box. Just because you've done it in a certain way, it allows us to create that space to do things differently. What we have found that the effectiveness for ourselves in our own journey is this commitment to equality that starts from our CEO, Julie Sweet, to our board of directors, because part of that is ensuring that we are creating, but also sustaining a culture of equality where everybody has the same opportunity to advance and thrive is a piece that I would want to call out. Specifically to some of the things that are working for us, we have this accessibility center of excellence. What's unique about it is really guided by our senior leadership team, who are not only sponsoring, but also influencing and impacting the way that we think about things and the decision making necessary to either gain resources or funding to help ensure that our infrastructure at Accenture is accessible. The power of the network that you all were talking about just a bit ago, we do have disability champions and allied networks that are really important as we talk about the enablement of this. We have close to, I think the number is like 36,000 people across 52 countries that are continuously part of this broader community to have this dialogue of what's needed, what's necessary, and not only to enable, but also to educate our allies and what they need to be doing in order to help promote and activate on this. Part of that promotion, in parallel to the infrastructure, what I have found the need for leadership alignment, we do have some training courses or experiences that we do part of our leadership development to ensure that we are equipped our people with the understanding and heighten their awareness of the lived experience. From a process standpoint, and you think about the structures, that leadership alignment, the strategy behind it, you have to enable with tools. And so one of the things that we also have at Accenture is this adjustment request tool that really streamlines the process for creating reasonable accommodations for people. It also allows people to just kind of pivot to making requests in a way that it's automated and supportive. And part of that support, as I said earlier, it is ensuring that we do have training courses to educate people not only about the tools, but also sensitization training on understanding, what does it mean, the practices or policies that Accenture has in support of this community, as well as what are some of the assistive technology and maybe even flexible work arrangement that one might need to accommodate. So these are just some examples of the things that we have in play, all anchoring back to, as I would say, and what I attest to seeing how we have developed our own practices within Accenture is how do we continue to accelerate a culture of equality to help our people to perform at the fullest potential. And part of that is ensuring that we look at it from a governance, with that network of sponsors, but also the centers, and then the tools that equipped our people to really help welcome people with different abilities, help people know that talent comes from diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences, and channeling this to help collaborate and network together, and as well as mentor. So that is some of the things that I wanted to highlight specifically around the actions and tools and creating a barrier-free workplace here at Accenture.
There you go, now we're muted.
Thank you so much, Carolina. And again, thanks to your organization, Accenture, for their cooperation and collaboration with Capital Factory on all the diversity, equity, and inclusion summits. Just before I let you go, Carolina, you've been a champion in this space for a while. What will be a few parting words you can give to perhaps other organizations as large as yours that might be struggling in the accessibility space?
I think it anchors on a couple of things that I mentioned, which is when we think about bold leadership, is really defining the strategy around why is this as a business parent, getting clarity on what that is, and helping to create governance and structure around what is the sort of things that we're asking our leaders to do, because it's not so much the what and the why, but it's the how. How do we do that? And I think we do a great job of showcasing the business case around these things, but not enough creating those roadmaps and initiatives to help support it. The other thing that I would say that policies and practices that support a culture of equality is so necessary. So it's about going back to, the talent life cycle, or the experience of the employee, right? From the moment that we're going to recruiting to the onboarding experience and throughout the development. These are things that I think that there has to be intentionality as we think about the journey and the employee experience, that we have to ensure that piece of that view or lens into is there. Additionally, there's more and more conversation around the customer experience. So for organizations that are focused on, products and services, is understand, how are those platforms or the way that people connect accessible, and what might we be doing as we think about the technologies and repurposing of the ways that people connect, and the way that we interact is something else that we have to look through that lens. So not only the employee experience, but the customer experience. And then lastly, anchoring on something that I hold dear to my heart is, how do we create empowering environments where people can be themselves, where people feel the sense of belonging? How do we create opportunities to have real talk, real conversations, so that it creates those channels of trusted connections that allow people to not only pivot to respect to the individual, which is one of our core values, but understanding that it helps us to really meet people where they're at, and help understand what are the needs that they have.
Thank you so much.
I feel like Brene Brown calls that a psychologically safe workplace.
That's right.
Absolutely what we all want. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Carolina.
again, Caroline.
Thank you.
All right, next panel, switching over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Zubi. We'll be discussing accessibility in hiring and human resource management to see what the workplace looks like currently and what it should look like moving forward. Workplace accessibility goes beyond accessibility of buildings and facilities, obviously. Many different factors should be taken into consideration to ensure a truly accessible workplace. I have the honor to help moderate this next panel, and Zubi, please jump in when you feel like it at any time. Please help me welcome to this Zoom stage, Melissa Dobbins. Melissa Dobbins is many things: entrepreneur, analyst, product strategist, mother, Star Wars enthusiast, leader, avid writer, USC Trojan, wife, science fiction fan, speaker, artist, etc. And while she has many facets, none of them define her. Just like everyone else, Melissa is more than a description on a piece of paper. She founded Career.place because she believes everyone deserves to be evaluated for their true potential and not by the biases triggered by a few words. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
I would also like to welcome to the stage Ms. Teresa Thomas with the MITRE Corporation. Teresa is program lead for neurodiverse talent enablement at MITRE and has a long history of advocacy for neurodiverse populations. She has been a house parent in a group home for adults with high support needs and is now a parent of an adult on the autism spectrum and is active in the MITRE Corporation's inclusion and diversity programs. Welcome, both of you. And I would love if you could start us off by sharing what you've been working on lately in the accessibility space. And if we don't mind, I'd love to start with Melissa.
Yeah, absolutely. So I focus quite a bit on the journey from a hiring standpoint. So making sure that employers are considering the full journey, the full experience of their candidates, so that the candidates that are the best fit for the position, for the organization, for the roles, are able to shine and showcase what they're capable of. So it's all about removing the biases and assumptions, removing the barriers, and creating spaces of empowerment for all candidates to be able to effectively and equitably compete for those jobs.
That's amazing. And does that have sort of a bit to do with how, where applications are taken and now how they're sort of digitally scanned for words and stuff? Okay.
You're absolutely right. There's so many different aspects of the entire process, from the concept of the resume itself to how it's evaluated to the interactions with the organizations and the assumptions at every stage that puts some people at an advantage and others at a disadvantage, having absolutely nothing to do with what their capabilities are for the position and the value they bring to the organization.
Yeah. Melissa, thank you. Teresa, if you would love to tell us about what you've been working on lately in the accessibility space.
Sure. Now I made notes because I was supposed to describe myself. So since I wrote it down, I'm going to go ahead and go there. And this is hard to do. Like I'm a middle-aged woman. Like I just have to say that out loud, right? I'm old enough to have grown children. White woman with dark hair and dark eyes. I'm wearing a black V-neck shirt, and there's a red light. So if you have vision impairment, you might notice this weird blinky red light. That's my headset, and I have a green screen. So I am sitting currently on the deck of the Starship Enterprise from Next Generation. So I work in our neurodiversity for MITRE. So I'm heading up two programs. Internal to MITRE, we host interns and co-op students who are on the autism spectrum. And externally, we lead a pilot teaching federal agencies how to recruit, hire, and support talent on the autism spectrum. Both of them really focus on teaching the managers and the coworkers how to be better teammates and managers to folks on the spectrum. So when I start, some of my training depends on who I'm talking to. But some of my training, I start with, today, I'm going to teach you how not to be a tool at work. I mean, it's just sort of all boils down to that. Again, it depends on who I'm talking to. And like Carolina said, to create empowering environments, and which oddly enough helps everyone be better teammates and managers to everybody. So back to our universal design. So those are my two main focuses right now.
Thank you. Okay, ladies, our first panel question is, what can be done to ensure that people with disabilities have as equal of an opportunity to apply for jobs as their peers? And what does proper outreach and recruitment look like? I know it's kind of a bigger one, but y'all have the answers. Melissa.
I just feel like anything I'm going to say is going to be what Melissa just said. So I'm going to let you start, because everything you said, everything everybody said so far, I'm just like, yeah, that
too, right?
That.
There's a lot of things. It's a very broad question. So I'll start with a few different pieces with it. One of the things that's critical, and this is across all of diversity and inclusion, it makes a huge impact for people with disabilities because they tend to be an overlooked group. They're not the only overlooked group, but they are a very commonly overlooked group. And that is, start with what you actually need for the position. Because in the absence of truly defining the skills and capabilities and experiences that you need, we will jump in with our assumptions and biases, most of which end up reflecting us. So if it's someone without a disability doing the recruiting or the hiring manager, we're going to look for similar patterns in those that we are interviewing to be included or not included. So we have to start with, what are the actual requirements, and how am I going to measure, how am I going to evaluate if those candidates meet those requirements?
Can I take that, Melissa, and take it just a little bit further?
Absolutely.
Something we're finding is when you're dealing with underrepresented populations, they've been taught to look for reasons they can't. It's their whole life. And anything you put in that job rec that is unnecessary, they're going to find it as a reason not to. And the less you have, the more likely folks from all across the board who have been told no their whole lives are going to be to feel like, maybe I can for this particular job. And just the more naked that job rec can be, actually the better candidates you're going to get. It feels like you're going to get just too many in it, but it's not true.
And to build on that point as well, is now when you're communicating, once you know what you're looking for, to very consciously communicate that in terms of, what kind of inclusive language can I use? What kind of show me descriptions to show that you are included? Don't tell me that you're diverse and that you look for diversity within your candidates. Show me the programs that you're doing. Show me the actions, the activities, and why I belong as an individual coming into this, and then where you're advocating, where you're communicating. Don't just stick to the comments. And I know this already came up during a previous panel. Don't just go to the popular job boards and think, now I'm done, they'll come to me. There are a lot of associations, advocacy groups. Start talking to the disability and 504 centers of the universities and colleges. Build those channels so that you're tapping into the talent and inviting that talent in. And those are just some of, there's a ton. The other one I really like, you know, and because there was a question before on where do I start? An easy place to start when it comes to looking at your talent acquisition side for inclusionary practices for people with disabilities is your benefits page. A lot of time benefits are, we have healthcare and this, that, and the other thing. They're very generic. They're one line and you're done. But various disabilities may require specific benefits, and they are not necessarily going to be comfortable asking. But if you showcase, here are the different things that we have for the variety of people that we embrace, not only are you empowering them to see themselves and make sure you're going to meet their needs, such as private small refrigerators for insulin, time off to take care of medical concerns, or, you know, readers, translators, you know, whatever it is that they need, they'll see it in the list. But you're also presenting to everybody that I get you.
Mm-hmm.
And offer those things for your interview.
Yes.
For everybody, you don't have to know somebody needs it before you offer it. Say, is there anything we can do to help you be more successful in your interview? Not, do you need a reasonable accommodation? I mean, because most people don't know what that even means. You know, I'm ADD. I need to probably not be in a glass room in a really, really busy corner. Even just people moving in their videos above while somebody's talking, I'm gone. So, what can we do to help you be more successful? And maybe you offer some things. Do you need a sign language translator or the questions ahead of time, which is a big one for folks on the spectrum? That means you're serious about it. If even before they get there, you're offering.
And one thing that I promised I would advocate for with one of our partners, which is Ability Jobs, is don't forget the bathrooms. So many times when you can get, even if you can get to the spot where you're doing an in-person interview, if you don't have accessible bathrooms, you haven't fully thought through the experience.
That's
wow. Somebody has lived that, you can tell.
Yes.
Okay, so since we're talking about reasonable accommodations, what would it look like, or what could it look like if employers were truly optimizing the workplace for disabled individuals? Or where can they start? I know question, or where can they start? I also feel like we could talk a little bit about, like, you know, coaching your HR recruits to know how to have those interviews and to know how to ask.
Don't point to your D&I folks when you're recruiting and somebody with a disability comes to you. Don't say, oh, that's another special group you have to do. I mean, for my, you know, I have a niche, and my niche is autism. And so the things to make a place look accessible really just makes it look like all the rest of us want it to look like. It's the difference between thriving and surviving for folks on the spectrum, who, by the way, are the least employed of all the disability groups. Like, we're looking at 85, 90% unemployed or underemployed for this group. And nobody likes the blinking, the light that is, nobody likes that. Nobody wants you cooking fish in the microwave. Nobody likes the loud noise as they're trying to focus, you know, but it goes back to what Carol said, and look closer, but a slightly different angle. So our original, part of that's having ERGs, right? A lot of folks have mentioned that too. Our original accessibility ERG champion was one of our VPs, and he sort of got roped into it. And as he was leaving the company, his parting words were, thank you for letting me do this. He said, I realized this is not hard. This is not expensive. This is not rocket science. By the way, MITRE does, so we know the difference, right? It's just about paying attention. It's just about paying attention and listening to your people. I mean, things like closed captioning turned on the TVs in your cafeteria that have the volume off anyway. It wouldn't have occurred to me. I would have just watched it and been frustrated. But it's about paying attention, and that changes a lot of things. Here's one we learned. Not a lot of folks in wheelchairs at MITRE yet, working on that. But when they arranged the cafeteria, you the tea and the Diet Coke and the, I don't know, whatever, sorted by shelves. And the guy in the wheelchair is going, so my choices are here. So why don't you organize them this way? So I get all of those choices. It's just about paying attention and listening. I think I make it sound simple. All right, it's not necessarily, but Melissa, yes, better than that.
I would mirror that. There's a lot that has to do with respect. On some cases, just having environments with choice makes a huge difference. So you do not want to say, hey, all of our developers are over there in that corner down that really narrow hall where all those books are in the way. So if you can't get over there, you're going to have some troubles. So you want to have choice with where people have their workspace, how people organize in a meeting space, in the cafeteria, even down to their food selection, because not everyone can eat off of every pallet, every type of food for whether it's for health reasons or religious reasons or anything else. So that variety of choice and that respect for individuals making those choices makes a very big difference. The another thing is I'm very big into universal accessibility. So I might not have a disability as defined by a set of criteria, but I just find it so much easier to have a reader. Then that should be, if you're not making any rules to, if you meet these requirements, then you get this, it's actually way easier to create the policies and much, much more open and accepting for people who either don't necessarily identify themselves as having a specific disability, but do identify that they would get a lot of value out of the benefit, out of what you have to offer, and those who aren't necessarily comfortable admitting that they may have a disability, and to give them the space to get to thrive without raising their hand makes a very big difference. Another thing is training. Train your people. Train your people. We do not come with skills from birth. We have to be trained on them. We might, every human has their strengths. Every human's going to have their weaknesses. Some of them are mapped as disabilities. Many of them are not. But to embrace training on how to interact with each other, on how to interview, on what is acceptable versus not acceptable criteria, such as, and we talked about the autism scale and Asperger's, eye contact is a big one. If you're used to, or you come from an environment where eye contact means confidence and respect, and then you interview someone who can't make eye contact, what conclusions are you coming to if you haven't been retrained? So also, or if you're talking with someone who's blind, they cannot make eye contact even if they want to. They do not know where your eyes are. So to be judged on something that might have absolutely nothing to do with success puts them at such a disadvantage. So respect choices that is accessible to everyone. Having, not having to defend yourself or self-identify in order to have access to those choices, and training all create much more inclusive environments.
I love that too, Melissa. You've told me before that disability and autism, it's easier to read if you think of it as just strengths and weaknesses. And, someone with autism who it seems it's more of just like a social interaction disorder, as you told me, is not dissimilar than having a coworker who lives in Germany and you guys, and English is their second language, and you're still trying to figure it all out, right? So yeah, that
You're
was one
just speaking a different social language. No one's right or wrong. It's just different.
Mhm. And it's just
Yeah,
allowing
and
people to work best within their strengths and weaknesses.
who on this call does not have weaknesses? Who on this call is like, oh, please do not call on me if this is what I need to do? All of us have a spectrum of capability and a spectrum of things that we would prefer never to have to do again. That has nothing to do with whether you identify as having a disability or not. So you don't necessarily need to treat people as special or different because we have specific sets of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, I will take us to the next question, possibly our last question. What are some examples you've seen in your company regarding effectively educating and training employees on working with employees with disabilities? And how would you recommend, or how do you ladies go about bringing those changes in other organizations?
A couple of things come to mind for me. Putting a face to what you're saying is really important. So, I mean, I do the show, I do the road show, I give my lunch and learn talk to every department, every division, every group that will listen to me. But having a time when I'm interviewing some of our autistic employees about how they're thriving in cyber and their little tips and tricks for survival and what their team does for them, and even did before they were diagnosed in the case of one of my favorite guys, it puts a face on it and makes it real and less scary. So that's important. Having just taking away that fear that this is going to be hard or that I'm going to do it wrong, or reducing the fear that you're going to do it wrong, makes people more likely to try something new. And one other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, we have access to an accessible escape room, which is really cool. It's just a standard escape room, but it starts with a talk about accessibility and to think about it and what it means and being, being a more accessible workspace. And then it's a regular escape room, except all the things in it are, a Braille reader, or, you have to use JAWS to figure out what this means, or it's all the different tools for accessibility. And somehow they made it a digital experience this year. I haven't tried that one yet, but I'll put the link in the chat here in just a second. So, yeah, and I have found with universal design, I have an excuse to come in and talk to you. I'm bringing in autistic students. You need to know what the heck's going on. It's my excuse to get in the door and tell you what's going on. And that it applies universally to most of the folks you're going to be working with, and teaches people to pay attention, to take a closer look, as they say. And it's most folks know somebody on the spectrum or love somebody on the spectrum. And so it's an easy one to catch people's attention. If you're looking for a toe in the door, I find it low-hanging fruit. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I completely agree. The humanization is super critical because it's so easy to assume or be afraid of or hate a concept. It's much harder for humans to hate humans. And so to humanize these concepts and to demystify what they are, what it is to be on the spectrum, for example, and to have someone say, look, I need you to tell me to stop talking. I'm not going to read this body language. So you're going to have to verbalize to translate it for me and to give permission that that is an okay behavior because it is not the language that the other person is used to speaking from a social standpoint. In my case, going into environments, it's like, do not put me in front of a whiteboard. Markers and whiteboards are terrifying to dyslexics. We can't make them say and do what you think they're supposed to do. And so things like that, to personalize the stories, because we all have those experiences, right? And so we're saying it's just like everybody else. I can't do this thing, or I'm afraid of this thing, and here's why. So don't put me in that situation. And that starts to create a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding. Sometimes it's a little harder than others, especially if you're trying to break into bringing in more people with disabilities. Don't shy away from inviting speakers in and specialists like Teresa to have these conversations, because that will allow you to start that process and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, I think I know you're super right about that, that personal touch, right? That having a connection with the story. If statistics could change people's minds, right? The word,
Right.
because the number, people don't relate to numbers. We relate to stories, we relate to each other, we relate to faces. And I think the conversation could be coming more welcomed from people in leadership positions, sharing their relations. And we're talking about disability today, but it's about all of the, this is about diversity and inclusion for all of the protected classes, right? So it's, yeah. And it amazes me that we have to find a business case for, to do the right thing, especially since it seems like just the fact that innovation itself is the outcome of adding more diversity into workplaces or products, I think should be enough to drive companies.
In defense,
please.
In defense of people who think in spreadsheets, I've come to appreciate them very much. And it is another language. That's another aspect of neurodiversity. Some people are linear, some people are creative, some people are relational, some people think in spreadsheets. And so I have to, and that is part of selling it, right? If you're going to sell it to your leadership, you got to hit both because you're going to have everybody at the table, but don't forget the stories.
Yeah. Well, and then it's also, you're not arguing logic with logic. Humans love their comfort zone. We are tribal by nature. And so we're going to gravitate towards familiarity. That's why it's so hard for groups to break into homogeneous environments, because we are the different. We are not the same. And that's exactly what this path is, like anything else, like what you said, Chris, around this DEI in all cases. This is another one of those cases we have to break down the us and them, the part of my tribe, not part of my tribe, and expand the tribe itself. And that's what all of these humanization and stories and combining the numbers with the emotions and everything else is all part of that process of expanding the tribe.
Thank you.
This is.
We have just you have a great time.
Yeah. I'd say, thank you to MITRE for being one of the sponsors. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very insightful questions.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa and Teresa did a fantastic job from talking about experiences of people in wheelchairs and not being able to get things in the cafeteria to people with autism, and then how people that are blind or Asperger's might not be able to read facial expressions very well, right? So before I let you ladies go, I just like I asked the other speakers, I'm just gonna ask each of you again from a theme of a standpoint of moving forward, right? What will be your parting words before we let you go? We'll start with you, Melissa, please.
Start small. And start with things that you can actually do. Do not start with conversation, just talk, because it can get stuck there. Start with action, and do not be afraid to misstep, because we all will. As soon as we move out of the comfort zone and expand those tribes, we're gonna get it wrong because it's not what we're used to. But that's okay, as long as we can learn from that and then do it better and better. So start small, take actions, learn from those actions. That is how you start creating a difference.
Start small, take action. Thanks so much, Melissa. And over to you, Teresa.
That's basically what I had written down. Do it wrong. Do it wrong.
Yeah.
Just do it wrong, and then do it again and do it better, and then do it again and do it better. And that's that start small is really important too. I don't always tell my managers this, but internships are fabulous for the students, but this is my manager apprenticeship program. And it's my way to start small and get as many managers trained up in being an accessible team as I can. So start small, do it wrong, and then do it again. Don't stay small.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
and I wanted to add in one note from a participant. They said, I have several employees on the spectrum, and we've found that the changes we've made have benefited all employees, which is, another one of those things that's not as talked about. But when something is made more accessible, it's easier for elderly to use. It's easier for people who are not so tech hip like me to use, right? It's easier for folks to share it because it's easier for them to be able to show someone it. So yeah, it's good on all accounts. Thank you so much,
Thank you
ladies.
again, Melissa and Teresa. Thank you very much for such a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we have our final piece of programming in today's summit, the Startup Showcase. Please let me welcome to the Zoom stage Capital Factory's venture lead, Courtney Real, to help introduce our startups and the judges. Welcome, Courtney.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great to see everyone here this afternoon, and what a wonderful conversation. So like our last panelist just said, what can we do to move forward and do better? So here are some of the startups that are going to help us do that and show you today. But first, I want to bring up my co-host, Colin Jones, who is the Senior Startup Partner Lead over at Microsoft for Federal Startups. So Colin, welcome to the stage.
Hey, Courtney, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, let's get this party started, and we are going to bring up our judges to the stage. So Colin, I believe you're introducing our first judge.
Absolutely. Thanks, Courtney. So joining us from Baker Bots, we have Brian Oakes, who is a partner. Brian, it's a pleasure to have you.
Awesome, Brian. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Colin. Thank
So
you.
next up on stage, we have Katie Stanton, who is the founder and general partner of Moxie Ventures.
Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you.
Thanks for being here, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Finally, from Wantra Ventures founder, Andrea Commons. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us.
All right, now that we got the crew, we're ready to get the party started. So we're going to have 3 startups who will be presenting to all of you guys today. These startups will have about 4 minutes to pitch, and then 2 minutes of Q&A from our judges. There'll be one winner today who will walk away with a wonderful prize pack from our partners over at Baker Bots. But we'll get the party started and get the first startup up. So Richard with RoboKind is going to be our first startup presenting. So Richard, let's bring you up to stage.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let's see. I guess I need to get my screen share going. I think I need permission for that.
Awesome. They'll give that to you in just a second.
Okay. I guess while we're waiting, I can introduce myself. I'm Richard Margolin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of RoboKind. And I am a 35-year-old white male with a big bushy beard, and I'm wearing a blue RoboKind shirt, and I have one of my robots, Milo, next to me here. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Is everyone able to see me and see the screen and everything?
Looks like it's up. You're good to go.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll get started then. Hi, I'm Richard Margolin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder for RoboKind. And we are an educational technology company that focuses on creating social, emotional, and behavioral programs for students with autism and other SEL needs. And we work primarily with public school systems, and we use small facially expressive robots to deliver an evidence-based curriculum. My slides are not progressing. An evidence-based curriculum that teaches those social and emotional skills. So as I said, we work primarily with the public school systems, but also some private institutes, things like that. And ultimately our program helps kids learn to self-regulate, recognize and express emotions, have conversations. And it's all evidence-based, and we have a huge amount of efficacy behind what we do. The robots are used in classrooms with students and are facilitated by teachers or other staff. So we also provide the training, professional development, and things like that. So while we have a wide range of research behind what we do, I'm going to focus on one of our biggest studies ever, which was a 3-year longitudinal study with the state of South Carolina's Department of Education, in which we were able to work with more than 700 students over 3 years and over 30 different school districts. So wide variety demographically of urban, rural, and everything in between. And so highlight from that study was 90% of the students we work with demonstrated mastery, resulting in observable generalizing transference to human interaction. So what that really means is basically the skills we're teaching these kids, they're able to use with people, which is what matters. It doesn't really matter how they do with the technology. Ultimately, the generalization is the most important thing. So our starting point is engagement. That's not an outcome, but it's a huge starting point when you're teaching anything. So in a traditional therapy model, we see 2.5 to 5% engagement in human-to-human therapy. With our robots Milo, plus a kid and a therapist, we see 87.5%. So we're several multiples better on the engagement, which means we get more time on task for teaching and learning and better outcomes. So going a little deeper into some of the results of this, and I know I'm time limited, so I can't go too deep, but besides the kind of quantitative things, the achieving mastery, accomplishing basically one or more of the IEP goals, all in the first year using our program, we also saw significant academic progress for about 70% of the students working with our program, which in a lot of cases wasn't even significantly measured prior to starting our program. But additionally, students working with our stuff increased engagement, not just with the program, but all learning. So more time on task, improved eye contact, increased peer interaction, and kids becoming verbal who were previously nonverbal or minimally verbal, which then helps them with more effective calm down, self-regulation, and just success in school and in life, which is fantastic. So what does that look like? So this is Cole. At 14, he was minimally verbal. He hadn't made much progress in therapy for a long time. On the left side of the screen, you can see Cole with his therapist, Danielle. He's kind of compliant but disengaged. And I have video of this too, and I've gotten to know it very well. Basically, he's kind of doing what's asked of him because he knows what he needs to do, but he's not really doing much. Versus his second session with Milo, which is pictured on the right side, he's leaning in, he's engaged. He was responding verbally to the robot and the program. And he went home at 14 and said hi to his parents for the first time after just a few sessions with the program. And so that's pretty amazing unto itself. And we have, at this point, thousands and thousands of examples like that, as well as thousands of examples of kids who needed significant repetition over years to make the progress, which the technology also enables really well. So let's jump into the business model part of this. It's pretty straightforward. We sell the robots. There's very good margin on those at $13,500. And then there's an annually recurring subscription for the content, curriculum, and other support services, as well as professional development services, which is a huge budget line item for public school systems. And we're trying to make sure everything we do is not just grabbing more money, but is really providing meaningful impact in the classroom. And so we've designed our curriculum to both for the students and for the teachers to make sure we're having the best impact. So this year has been really great so far. We're more than 75% of the way to where we were for revenue last year and expect to more than double this year. We've had some big deals closing, and even right before I got on this call, found out that this customer here, Richland, who just purchased 14 programs, wants another 15. So that's really exciting. And the stimulus money has really just helped that continue to grow. So like I said, we have a lot more research that I know I don't have time to get into, but we've worked with tons of universities validating every element of our program. So that's what I've got. Last thing I'll add is we're CASE endorsed. CASE is the Council of Administrators of Special Education. We're the only social emotional learning curriculum endorsed by them. And that was a 2.5-year process. It's not a pay to play kind of, rubber stamp. And so that's been really meaningful in helping us kind of make progress and move forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Great job, Richard. So we are going to pass it over to Katie first to see if she has any questions.
Hi, Richard. So I'm Katie Stanton. I'm a white woman wearing a black shirt and in a very messy kitchen. So very impressive what you've built. And I'm curious how you got your initial sales in New Mexico, Indiana, and South Carolina, and how does that scale?
Yeah, so the New Mexico sale was kind of a unique one. This is a small rural district that decided with their CARES Act money that they just want to go all in, and they're actually, they have 33 schools, but they serve a big itinerant geographic area. And so that's why they ordered so many robots. And we're in the process of implementing, but CARES Act money right now and some of the other stimulus money is helping kind of accelerate things that were very slow last year, frankly. And then Richland, South Carolina was actually, their first robot was part of that longitudinal South Carolina study. And now that that's over, they've decided they want at least one program for every elementary school in the district. And then Indiana's a weird one because I actually lobbied and got legislative funding passed for the initial program. And now we're seeing it expand organically and naturally with, again, all this additional kind of stimulus money that's available to these schools right now.
Awesome. And Andrea, we're going to pass the mic to you. Any questions?
Oh, thank you so much, Richard. This is fantastic. My question is, do the kids or the people respond better to the robot than to the therapist and their family and friends? Or is it just a different experience? It's absolutely fascinating.
It's a different experience. I would say to some extent better in when you're trying to engage and teach these specific skills. Ultimately, like I said, what we care most about is the generalization, and we have 142 robot-led lessons, and then we have 260 generalization activities behind it to help with that transference. But that engagement is a big starting point. If you think about what these robots really do, it's all the basics. So they're facially expressive, they move, they gesture, there's all kinds of learning reinforcement, but it's pared down from a bandwidth perspective. So if we've got anyone, on the spectrum here, which I think we do, you can get overwhelmed really easily with a lot of extraneous stuff. We're able to just kind of only deliver the information needed at the right time, which I think makes it easier to absorb. And that's kind of both from the research and from a lot of discussions with a lot of autistic individuals. So.
Amazing. Brian, we have time for one last question.
Sure. I'm Brian Oakes, white male in a blue button down here. And I was just curious, I'm a patent lawyer, so I was just curious about the technology and kind of what is your roadmap for future development, and also whether any of it's proprietary, like protected by patents or other IP?
Yeah, so right now we have some patents on the face technology. We also maintain some trade secret on some of the process for generating expressions. And we have a few other patents on kind of delivery of our content. That said, these robots are actually getting kind of old. And so we're in the process of kind of planning for the next generation. And with that, I think we'll probably be able to protect a lot of new IP, because these were created, as cool as they are and as well as they work, before we had customers. And now we have, thousands of people using these programs regularly. And while we got a lot right, there's always things, we know we can do better. And so as the engineer guy, I'm looking forward to that next opportunity.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Richard, really appreciate the time here. Some amazing technology and no doubt some pretty great results already. So really wish you the best of luck moving forward, but we do need to move on. So I want to welcome our next founder to the stage. So founder and CEO of Upbrainery Technologies, Ghazal Qureshi. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And while I'm doing that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ghazal Qureshi, and I am the CEO of Upbrainery. I am a South Asian woman wearing a green shirt. Are we good? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So between vaccines, mask wearing, social distancing, we're slowly beginning to emerge from this COVID pandemic. However, what the pandemic has really exposed is a fatal flaw within our educational system. Kids with learning differences are being left behind, increasing the ever-growing divide between disabled students and their social peers. So what is the issue? Not every child's brain works the same way, and that is for just the general public. While some thrive in traditional academic environments, others struggle and are unfortunately left behind. There are 7.1 million students today that qualify under the IDEA definition of disability. Only 19.6% of them ever enter college, and of those, 66% drop out. This is a clearest example of failure in our economy, and also one of the easiest to fix. If we provided the right support, the labor market would expand exponentially and bring the next generation of potential doctors, engineers, artists, and inventors. Parents are no longer helpless. They can help their children with or without disabilities to stay engaged, master concepts and skill sets with the help of our BrainLab educational marketplace. So how does it work? Imagine Darcy. Darcy's a middle schooler, interested in Legos, loves to draw, but has a hard time sitting through lectures. Darcy's interested in all kinds of cars and their features. Darcy enters the BrainLab ecosystem. BrainLab, based on Darcy's profile and interactions and learning style, learns to adapt and catches on that Darcy really performs better when presented with visual aids. BrainLab adapts Darcy's lessons to video and graphical presentations while avoiding really heavy text. And then all of a sudden, Darcy's assessments begin to soar, and Darcy can then be presented with a visual journey map through the application that showcases the path to maybe even becoming a space shuttle parts engineer. So how does BrainLab work? BrainLab is a two-sided educational marketplace that addresses the different learning styles of each specific student with the use of AI and machine learning, and matches them to content and providers that work best for them. And now we are actually working on adding adaptive tools which will provide accessibility to all and level the playing field. And how are we doing that? We're adding sophisticated AI designed to respond to natural speech, thus making tutor and intervention a lot easier. Integration with voice smart devices for users to receive help with subjects and experts via a voice interface. Imagine saying, hey, Google, find me a tutor that can help me with my trig homework in like 20 minutes. We will be adding ability to increase font sizes as well as contrast color palettes to help students with disabilities, reading out of instructions, as well as video-based classes with closed captioning and ability to slow down, which works really well with dyslexia and hearing impairments. BrainLab consists of three major components. Imagine Uber meets Amazon for education, which is an on-demand marketplace with live or do-it-yourself content that really identifies the students' learning styles and provides access to these matched providers and content 24/7. And then for both any type of student, disabled or not disabled students, engagement is really key. BrainLab has built an immersive content building toolkit for content providers. Through gamified learning, 3D modeling, engagement is really achieved. And then we have AR on our roadmap for 2021. A goal mapping toolkit is the third piece of the puzzle that we have, which aligns the goals of the students, their interests, their learning styles, the courses that they have taken, the skill set matches them all up to help them build a goal-oriented visual journey map. With partnerships in place with Whataburger, Houston Rockets, and Girl Scouts of America, utilizing our educational two-sided marketplace to reach the students and constituents in their communities, we have really started to now, we have proven the product and are now starting to add the accessibility pieces into the marketplace. Our team is very seasoned and experienced in both technology and education. I'm a computer scientist, and Braintree is my second educational company. My previous company was an educational franchise company, which I exited for 10x. And in 2020, I launched Braintree to really address the problems with educational delivery. And something to note, I actually did this pre-COVID. So this was really built from the ground up to really address the problems that I have seen and uncovered in the educational space. What we are looking to raise $1 million to build the accessibility features and the AI and machine learning, and it will provide an 18-month runway for our Brainry. My passion is to change the educational landscape. This model is so outdated and has been for years. And what has happened with COVID is that we have taken the in-classroom archaic experiences, slapped them onto Zoom and called it an online classroom. And that is now how kids learn. And this is really, really affecting kids all across the board. And then my other passion for accessibility, actually, it opened up my eyes this past year with the pilots that we launched with these organizations, with the issues that we started to uncover and started to see firsthand the need to have this really be at the forefront of education. My own son, who is a junior in a private high school, had an incredibly hard year because he's severely ADHD and dyslexic. And it really opened up my eyes to the issues that students really face when they don't have parents that can provide the resources or step in and really intervene on their behalf. And this is why this is such a passion project for the entire Brainry team. Thank you.
Gazal, thank you so much. Great overview. We'll bring back up our judges and we'll go into some quick Q&A. Let's start with Andrea.
Great vision. Which parts of this are already built and what's to be built?
So the entire part, which is the marketplace, connecting the tutors, content providers, and sorry, I'm just gonna stop share. And the parents, teachers, all of that is built. We have started loading content into the marketplace in order to get the flywheel going of content. Our team has extensive experience in content development, so we have just started loading in. As of yesterday, we launched the first phase of the marketplace. So all of the pieces are built. The only piece that is left to be built, and it's on our product roadmap and will be completed by July of 2021, is the piece that builds the user journeys and the AI and machine learning piece of it that will be coming next. So that is the only piece that's left. And after that, we're starting work on the accessibility pieces.
Great, thanks. Brian, do you have a question?
Sure, I was just wondering, what is your plan to entice content providers to provide that content that you need and to reach critical mass so that you can create this two-way marketplace that you're talking about?
Right. And, and that's the biggest struggle with two-way marketplaces, right? Because you have two sides of the customer side that you need to address. Very well aware of that. And with my experience with my other company, I know how to go out and get parents. I really do. We, that is what the space that we played in. So getting to the customer, you have to have something enticing for the customers. And in order to get the content providers, you need to have the parents. So what we are doing is actually, that's what we did, is we built content for our own marketplace. So we plan to eventually be a small content provider on our own marketplace. But right now, in order to get that flywheel going, we're deploying the content, getting parents onboarded. And as soon as we have parents onboarded, then we can go to the other side of the marketplace and say, hey, we have this many X number of customers already looking for new content. Why don't you come join us on board?
Great. Thanks for the question, Brian. Katie, anything from you?
Yeah, congratulations. What an impressive organization you've been building. Can you talk a little bit about your wedge? Who is your target customer, their age? Is there a target subject matter, homeschool versus in-school, private versus public?
Absolutely. So you know what? We want to solve the problem of the world, and we want to say, hey, we can solve everybody's problem, but we know that that's not smart, right? So our target is right now the middle school and high school market, and we're looking for parents to engage with the parents. So here's a little step back I'm going to take and give you a little brief background. We launched March of 2020, 2 weeks before schools shut down. Initially, the idea was to go straight to the schools and the teachers and allow them this platform to be able to use to add their own content, build their own custom journeys, be able to engage with the students and have additional resources to help. However, with schools being shut down and our platform was not even started at that time, we just put our head down and started doing user engagement through these organizations and trying to learn our platform. So for now, the plan is going straight to the parents and consumers. And then we are going to be starting with the business development because that is a much longer life cycle. We plan to implement that as soon as we start our fundraising, or we get going with our fundraising round, so we can bring in the business development expertise and things like that. But eventually we do plan to go to the schools and organizations, because remember, schools have a 1 to 500 student to or a counselor to student ratio. So if your child or you are not really right there on top of it, your child is not getting any type of help, no matter how, how they perform, whether they're on top of the class or on the bottom rung of the class or have any issues with disabilities. My kids themselves, I come from like everything is driven from my passion of my background, right? So I have a child that had a traumatic brain injury. This is not even my son. My oldest daughter, top of the class, had a traumatic brain injury for 1.5 years, had to be learned to actually read again. But we were right there and we were on top of the counselors. No, this is not, what you cannot just put her to the side. So what happens is that when schools are so overwrought with lack of resources, kids are just sliding by. They're just being pointed to whatever is the easiest way for them. And no longer do these kids need to go to, every kid needs to go to a 4-year college. There are so many resources, so many paths, so many certifications, 2-year colleges. All of this is being built within the visual journey map. So to answer, long answer to your question, parents for now, and eventually the schools and organizations.
Awesome job. Thank you so much. We are going to bring up our last and final startup. We have Arvo with Wheel the World. So we'll bring him up to stage. Awesome job. You're up, and we're just going to wait for your deck, and then the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
Yes.
Do you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Very nice to meet you all. I'm very excited to be part of this event. Do you see my screen now?
Yep, we can see it. The stage is yours.
Awesome. My name is Álvaro Silverstein. I'm Latin America, originally from Chile, where I have lived most of my life, as you can get from my accent. 35 years old and co-founder and CEO of Wheel the World. The story of my startup starts with a dream that I had, that was to visit this place, Torres del Paine in Patagonia. But for many years, I saw this as impossible, given I moved myself in a wheelchair since I'm 18 years old. And I assumed that it was impossible for me to access this place. But one day, with my good friend Camilo, we started figuring out on how to do a trip together to this place, finding what were the accessible places to stay, how we would move around, and the equipment needed to navigate this place. Long story short, I became the first wheelchair person ever to navigate Torres del Paine in a wheelchair. And our story went viral, specifically in California, where I was living at the time, and also in Latin America. And we started receiving hundreds of people reaching out to us, willing to repeat the same trip as I did. So we started organizing this trip to other people and started figuring out that the travel industry is very much in depth in terms of inclusion and accessibility. First, accessibility offer is limited, but most important than that is that information about accessibility of the travel industry is very hard to find, not digitalized, and inaccurate. That is making that millions of people people with disabilities are having terrible experiences when booking trips through conventional services, and millions of others that are not willing to travel because of not relying on the current services that they are. This is why we founded Wheel the World, with the purpose to make the world accessible. And we've been building the booking.com for people with disabilities, seniors, and their companions to find and book accessible travel experiences, accessible accommodations, tours, and activities. We list them through gowheeltheworld.com with specific accessibility information and a user experiences designed for our users. We are raising information about accessibility through an app. Our community of more than 100,000 people that are committed to accessibility. And we are listing this accessibility information through also connecting through the APIs of the travel industry to list accessible offer with accessibility detail information in detail and prioritizing this. We started in 2018 and with few listings in Latin America, we achieved that more than 1,100 people traveled with us, generating around $1 million in revenues. And we realized that there was a network effect in our business in which, while we added new destinations and more listings, our conversion rates in our marketplace increased, and we were able to convert more people and allow more people to book trips to the places that they actually wanted to travel. And this is something that, this is a big market. 1 billion people in the world has any kind of disabilities. But if you also consider our families, our friends, there's 2 billion people that are also directly related to them and are also in need of accessibility. If you think about our users, only 1/3 of our users has been people with disabilities. 2/3 has been people with accessibility needs that are companions of people with disabilities that travel with us. And if you consider that population is aging, by 2050, there will be 2 billion people in the world that has a disability. We say that sooner or later, all of us will have a disability at some point, but not worry, because Wheel the World will be for you and for everyone in the world. We are a great team of 20 people, very diverse, and 30% of our people are software engineers, 59% of our team are women, and 30% of people from our team has a disability, committed to make the world accessible and with the right skills to build the best solution for people with disabilities to travel the world. We raised last year, in the most terrible pandemic and crisis of the travel industry, a $1.9 million seed round, basically to put our systems in place and build our tech team, and to increase the number of listings and new destinations that we offer, to build this network effect and liquidity to allow millions of travelers to book trips with us. And we have built an amazing brand that has been featured by different well-known visual people as Mark Zuckerberg. We have been awarded by Lonely Planet as the best solution for accessible travel. And even we have been reached by the Kingdom of Bhutan to enhance accessibility and accessible travel at that country. And finally, we are starting to experience growth again after a tough 2020. We've been having important growth, especially in the past 2 months. In the past 6 months, we've been experiencing growth in signups in our website. Finally, we are now starting to convert those signups into bookings, and we are very excited about what's ahead of us. We are as you may understand, with our seed round, we are with a same runway of 18 months. We have an amazing team. We are gaining traction, committed to and focused to experience growth in terms of listings and travelers, and envisioning to raise a Series A by mid-2022 or end 2022. Finally, to make this allow millions of people travel the world to thousands of destinations, people with disabilities to travel as anyone else, and continue making the world accessible. Thank you very much. I'm happy to get your feedback and comments.
Awesome job, Alvaro. So we're going to pass the mic to Brian to see if he has any questions.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering how you generate your content for the listings. How do you gather all the information from around the world about the different accessible options?
Yes, so we have built an app that we call the accessibility mapping system that are basically different journeys to raise the important information that we need to raise for a hotel, a vacation rental, a tour, an activity, a museum. And we are we've been generating really cool content since 2018. We have plenty of documentaries in YouTube that you can check. And we have built a community of people, not necessarily that has a disability, committed with accessibility. And today we call them the Will the World Mappers that are using our app to go and map the facilities, the properties, the listings that we want to list at gowilltheworld.com. We are focusing on the destinations that we really want to have inventory, and that one many times we pay them as like an Uber kind of payment, Uber driver kind of payment. And many times we have people doing this by themselves as like volunteers. It's just we pay when we really need the inventory that our users are requesting to have. So that's pretty much. Today we have around 80 people from 50 different cities around the world mapping inventory for us. Today we have around 400 listings offered at gowilltheworld.com, and we are envisioning that we will end the year with 3,000 listings.
Awesome job. We have time for one more question. So Katie, I'm going to pass the mic to you. So no pressure.
I'm so glad, because this is very near and dear to my heart. I have two cousins in wheelchairs, and I've frantically texted them about what you're building, and they have one feature request, which is the hotels to have extra, to show who has extra chargers, because they need to charge their chairs, and often that becomes an issue. So thank you for what you're building. Quick question on distribution. How do you work with other different travel platforms on distributing the content?
That's a really good question. So today we are promoting Go Will the World as the place for people to book our trips, okay? And we have built different affiliate partners with travel agencies that want to book trips for their clients through us. We envision that when we have like a more massive volume of accessibility inventory, we will be able to build APIs to offer to Booking.com and Expedia and Airbnb, so they can also access this accessibility data that they don't have, so they can get good use to it for their like users with disabilities. We envision this in a second stage. We're not focusing on that yet, but we are building our systems so we can divide our marketplace with our accessibility data platform, so we can then like build the easy webhooks to build the APIs for another platforms when we scale.
Awesome. Great job. Well, the judges, you guys are going to a secret undisclosed location to deliberate who will be the big winner of today. And I have no idea how you're going to decide, because those were all three impressive companies. So thank you to our startups for joining us. So we're going to hang on for just a moment. So stay tuned. I'd love to know in the chat who you think would win, or how you want to implement these, either sharing it with friends and family or recommending RoboKind to your local school district or upbringing. So put that all in the chat. Let's engage, and then we'll be back in just a few moments with our winner.
Hi y'all. That was really cool. Will the World just blew my mind.
Yep, I think all three startups had strong pitches. I'm sure the judges are gonna have quite a challenge trying to.
Brainery also unbelievably fascinating. Thank you so much, entrepreneurs, for working on what you've been up to. We know it can be thankless, but it certainly is not. Okay, so think we were gonna play a video, but maybe I'll just ask you about that video in a minute. First, I wanted to tell folks how we met. So in 2016, I competed in my first ever pitch event with my business partner. It was a pitch black for tech entrepreneurs of color put together by Movement 50.
That's right.
Yeah. And my partner pitched and we worked on it together. I was really excited.
Yeah, I think you guys took judges prize, first place, right?
We did. Thank you so much. Wes did an amazing job. We took first place. It was a lot of ego for my first pitch. But you took crowd favorite. And I was shocked that you didn't win because my partner Wes and I were pitching Big and Tall Men's retail solution. Groundbreaking for our industry, but nothing like creating a product that not only gives users vision, but is also brain controlled. When you pitched, I was so inspired. It was one of my first looks at what individuals were up to in entrepreneurship, and I had no idea what was capable. So I thought you ruled.
Thanks so much.
Tell us about Think and Zoom. Tell us a little bit more about it. I think they're gonna play our video.
Awesome.
Are you visually impaired or just need to see things up close? Introducing Think and Zoom. Think and Zoom detects your focus through the Mindwave EEG headset and tells the camera on Google Glass to zoom in. Blink to snap a picture and see clear detail even at a distance. Ever wished for a way to zoom without cords, handheld remote controls, or buttons? It's as simple as that. Just look, think, and zoom. Introducing Think and Zoom.
Thanks so much for that video. So
so
right on cue, right?
Yes.
Well, what you just watched is the world's first technology solution that allows people to be able to control their blind assistive technology by simply thinking. And I think I already mentioned earlier that my journey into entrepreneurship was just merely an accident. I just did what most engineers do, just build, right? And so that was my attempt at solving my personal problem. And my personal problem was that I have 3 distinct genetic rare progressive eye disorders.
Yeah.
Long story short, I'm going blinder slowly but surely. And the 2 issues are, sometimes I need to make things bigger, but the solutions are manually controlled. Sometimes I need to screen read, and I'm going to answer in this segment Carol's question. But again, it's manually controlled. And so when we look at the history of assistive technology, at least for the blind, I think back in 1975, a gentleman, Ray Kurzweil, invented what is called OCR, optical character recognition. So if you think of a piece of paper with printed text on it, you put it on a scanner, and then it reads out the text characters. So that was back in 1975, it was revolutionary.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because it could help people who couldn't see to read text. And then I think in the next decade, 1986-ish, Jim Thatcher, I believe, invented the first screen reader. So what is a screen reader? A screen reader is a piece of software that runs on your computer and reads out the text characters that's on the screen. So it converts that to audio for people who can't see very well to listen to it. I believe someone encouraged me to give a sample of screen reading software. So let me try to turn up the volume here so that folks can listen to it. And here we go. So we're gonna pick a good section.
Pick a bio.
We'll just pick this short section. So I'm just highlighting, and then here we go.
Accessibility and Tech Summit presented by Microsoft.
So that's screen reading. But again, you realize I had to use my fingers, right? So Think and Zoom tries to bring, to a blind users the best experience possible, right? It looks at our other counterparts. You're sitting and you're looking at me. I don't really see you holding your eyeballs or tweaking them or controlling, right? So how can someone with a visual impairment have the same experience you had, or at least as close as possible? And so it wasn't really about the technology behind it, but I discovered along the way that our brains have neurons, and those neurons communicate via electrical impulses. So it's as if humans have our own natural electrical circuitry. Right? And I said, okay, how can I, take this natural circuitry and send it to the digital assistive technology, right?
Amazing.
And I had to now start to learn a little bit about neuroscience and the different parts of the brain. And then I had to learn about brain-computer interface. So the brain-computer interface is the sensor that touches the scalp and collects all of the brain waves or via EEG brainwave signals.
Okay.
So these are just waves, just signals,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And then the BCI collects it, and then you have to send it somewhere, preferably like in some software or perhaps machine learning AI that can now process, analyze, and understand what this brain is doing. And then you can then map it to perhaps an assistive technology software to then do something like the screen read. So why do I necessarily have to use my hands for all of this? Why can't I just look, think, and read? Right. And so that's where the name Think and Zoom came about. Just look, think, and zoom in to see better.
Awesome, y'all. Thank you so much. I want to interrupt because we have some very exciting news.
Awesome.
So we have the winner here. So drum roll, please. Alvaro with Wheel the World. You are going to be taking away today's prize. So congratulations, but to all of our startups, what an impressive group of startups that we had today. And Alvaro, congrats.
Congrats,
Wheel
friend.
the world.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited, and congrats the other teams, because I was really thrilled to see your pitches, and I'm surprised with my win. So I'm excited. Thank you very much for having me here.
So we'll connect to you afterwards. You have won a Baker Bots prize. They're a great partner of ours, and so they're excited to offer you some support in getting, everyone out traveling, which I think is something we all want. So thank you, and I'm going to pass it back over. And thanks to all of our startups again today.
Thank you, Courtney. Judges and founders. Wow. Congratulations to Wheel the World.
That was amazing.
Very, very cool. Airbnb is going to buy you. Keep going, guys. Many thanks to our title sponsor, Microsoft, for making the Accessibility and Tech Summit possible. Another shout out to our supporting sponsors, Accenture and MITRE, for your support. Last but not least, thank you to Baker Bots for contributing the prize package.
And thanks to our host Capital Factory, as well as the other hosting company, Think and Zoom. So folks, thanks so much for being here with us. It's been a great time being here with you at this inaugural Accessibility and Tech Summit, but we are just scratching the surface. Please stay tuned for all the other diversity, equity, and inclusion summits that are put together by Capital Factory. In June will be the LGBTQ in Tech Summit, so stay tuned for that.
If you'd like to keep in touch with the DEI community fostered by Capital Factory, join their LinkedIn group, which you can find in the chat, and follow us on Twitter at CF Diversity. That's all we have for you today. Be sure to check your email momentarily for the post-event survey where you can provide feedback, and we'll post the link of the whole event on LinkedIn and on YouTube. You can help us make Capital Factory a better place by filling out that feedback form. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Have a great one. Thanks, Zuby.
Thank you, Chris.